As you can see, guys, we're in a different environment, a different setting. I thought it was very fitting with the message that I wanted to share with you all today. The last 3 weeks since we've last talked, I've been really doing some deep diving, and an aspect of it I think that a lot of people don't talk about is, aside from the striving that we discussed, aside from realizing who we are, right, in that identity, at times it isn't enough, again, going back to those core wounds, right? And something that we discussed is, let's say, for example, the shame wound, okay? Every human is born with that ability because from humanity we were ashamed. An aspect of it that you could look at is in the Garden of Eden, is Adam and Eve were unclothed, right? They were embarrassed. When they realized that they were naked, they were ashamed. And so you have, if you think about, like, you can see the tree behind me, hopefully, but I want you to think about a tree and how deep the roots run. So the most basic roots, like that soil, right, that we come from, think of that as humanity. Think of that as the first humans, Neanderthals, however you want to envision it. And I want you to think about all the things that they had to go through to get to this point, right? When you look at how far humanity has came as a whole, you can look at it through an optimistic or pessimistic lens. And just like anything, we're still striving, right? We're still trying to attain. We're still trying to figure things out. It's 2000 plus years now. And we have all this technology and all these things, but we're also losing that sense of self. And so the purpose of this video is to remind you who each and every single one of you actually are. And so getting back to my point, because I'm going to keep this completely raw. I'm not planning on editing this at all. Um, because you guys, you need to be able to see that something that I've been realizing more and more is that we strive so much, and perhaps it's just me, but I feel like there's others as well, to attain this level of perfection. You have social media that's telling you who you should be. You have family telling you who you should be. You have friends telling you who you should be. And when I look at it through that particular situation, I think back to what they portrayed Jesus to be, right? When Jesus came to this earth, they thought he was a savior. They thought he was going to protect them from the Romans, like he was this deliverer, right? They thought he was a prophet. They thought he was all these things. But what they never realized is that they didn't grasp the Father's understanding of who Jesus actually was created to be, right? And so that also pertains to us. So getting back to my story about the trees, is our roots run so deep. Something that I was thinking about today as I was driving here was, think about how many generational lines, think about births and death, think about unforeseen circumstances, think about the world around you, think about events, major events, wars. And I want you to just sit with yourself for a second and think all those generations that came before you, and here you are today. And it's such a beautiful thing, because a lot of us, we're so stuck in this concept of where's the world? Where do I fit into this? Like, we feel like missing puzzle pieces, right? We feel like the jigsaw puzzle. And this jigsaw puzzle, when it's disassembled, doesn't have anywhere to go, right? And so where we are today in this world and in society as a whole is, we feel like we have to fit these puzzle pieces. But what we're not realizing is that it's okay to be imperfect. I don't have to pretend that I'm living some sort of life. I don't have to edit all my photos and videos to make myself look more, less functional than others, less appealing than others. And I'm not just saying this in an appearance sense, because I know that the world is going in that direction. It's so appearance focused, appearance based. But what we're not getting is how blessed we actually are to be able to grace this planet, irregardless of the wars and the things that are going on, because God said, I created you for such a time as this, you know? And so going back to what people forced their idea of what they wanted Jesus to be. But Jesus was just a representation of the Father. He didn't come here to to deliver them from the Romans. He didn't come here to serve their purposes. He came here for a higher good. And I think what we tend to forget sometimes is we see only what's in front of us. We see only the things that, all the bad, all the negative things, all the changes, and we're not used to them. We're scared. But what we're not thinking about is how many of our ancestors, how many of our generational line, mathematically it took for us to get to where we are now. And we're alive and we're here for a time being, right? We're here for a duration. But how we spend that time is so valuable. And so going back to that shame wound, you have these roots, right? You have humanity's roots run so deep that it's also in our DNA, it's in our biology. So even when you start to do the self-work, right? You do the journaling, let's say, you do the meditation, you do the shadow work, you do the sitting with yourself, you do your prayer and whatever else you tend to do, and it still doesn't feel like enough. We can't forget what we came from. Not just your parents, but from the very beginning of time, right? Because each and every single one of you has some form of value to add to this planet, whether you believe it or not. I don't care what anybody spoke over you. I don't care what anybody's told you. You have so much value. You have so much that you can bring to this world. And we can't let the constant striving, we can't let the perfection, we can't let the, oh, I'm scared for somebody to see real. Because what I'm understanding is, especially Generation Z, we have such a strong desire for what is real now because we're so surrounded by everything fake. We're surrounded by everything material. Even right now, as I'm doing this video, I'm thinking to myself, my ADD's all over the place, and so I'm kind of like trying to bulletproof thoughts, like make bullet points in my head. But that's okay. Because the overall message is beyond it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to not be perfect all the time. And I'm so sorry if anybody ever told you you can't be perfect, right? You can't slip up. You know, I came from a home with a narcissist mother where everything that I did was never good enough. And so my abandonment wound, one of my abandonment wounds that I'm healing through right now, has to deal with I'm not enough. So when people let me down or they say something that, like plans don't go through, I immediately jump to the thought of I wasn't enough. And frankly, that's absolute garbage. Because when I'm sitting with myself and I think back and ruminating on the thoughts, I thought I did the best humanly possible as I could in that situation. And I think this is what so many of us get wrapped up into, is we get so stuck in our thoughts and so unraveled, and we're so concerned about trying to perfect things, trying to people please, trying to, that partiality of growing up. If I didn't meet standards, then mom was depressed, right? Mom was disappointed in me, and I couldn't leave mom to be disappointed. And so I learned to people please. I learned to constantly give over to myself. I learned to, block off what they call your throat chakra, right? Where energetically you're scared to speak up for what you believe in. I mean, I've been with some of the most lovely individuals, and I've been in situations where I don't agree with what they're saying, but subconsciously when I'm doing the work and I'm realizing this, I was so scared to speak up for what I actually was feeling, because that equated to, if I tell you what I'm feeling, you're just gonna leave, so I better just keep quiet. And there's so many of us I was talking with a friend who works at our local bank the other day, and I said, even men, right? To the men watching this, maybe you work for Fortune 500 company, right? Maybe you're in corporate business. All my business guys out there, I still want you to think about that aspect. Excuse me, you sacrifice your mental health at the expense of people pleasing, right? That meeting a quota, it's giving you fulfillment, but a lot of the fulfillment that us men feel that we crave, that I don't think women fully understand, is men need a degree of validation as well. And this is something that I disagree with about the red pill. There's no human in this planet that I can think of that goes, "Oh no, I don't want some sort of encouragement." Even the people that go, "Oh, please don't thank me." That's because of their own wounding. We were told as kids horrible things, or we were told, you don't need this. You don't need to be validated. You don't need to be encouraged. Man up. Pull your bootstraps up. And to me, that's what toxic masculinity is. It's the lies and deception that we face, and I think there's this growing, right? There's this growth of men, especially within our generation, that are trying to become in tune with themselves, and even the past generation, because they're seeing the flaws in the system. When I was entertaining the whole concept of the red pill, it was because it made me feel valued, right? Because as men, we find value in what we do. We find value in what we work. This is why, as you get older, you see men have a distinct understanding that as they get older, if they lose that job, a lot of them go into a steep of depression where they have suicidal thoughts. Because from the very beginning of time, let's go back to Adam again, right? It says that man is going to toil under the sun for the rest of his life before he could have anything that he wanted. But because of the fall of humanity, however you want to look at it, I think Jordan Peterson talks about this too. We consistently toil under the sun because that's where we find value. Just as a man wants to be respected, a woman wants to be loved. A woman wants to be validated. So let me ask you this. Is it wrong to feel any sort of validation? Is it wrong to be encouraged, man, woman, whatever your gender is, whatever your sex is, because we didn't get that as children? Because I would actively have to disagree with the fact that we're deprived of those things, that we should be deprived of those things, because this is what adulthood is. If we are to be beacons of love, we're on this world for such a short period of time. Why is there so much chaos? Why is there so much disruption? Why can't people just be in circles, right, where there's community of healing, where there's community of love, where they can be embraced and work through those things? And I think there's such a push, right? I can say this for experience. The last 2 weeks, I did 6 webinars last week with two different schools that I'm going through, or a school that I'm going through, and a coach that I've just started with recently. And I was just numbed out. And I thought to myself, this is oddly strange. I've never been completely numbed out to the point that I can't feel emotions unless something tragic has happened. And I realized the reason that why I was feeling it was because I overwhelmed myself. So I just want to caution you guys. Growth is a process. And it even talks about in the Bible, the very word disciple comes from the Greek word mathemitos, I believe. You can spell check me on that. But it means to create basically that you have a mentor and you understudy, right? You learn from them. So this aspect of people thinking like growth is a negative thing or growth is a negative trait, in order for you to be fully proficient at something, you're going to need that time of growth. In my current life, there's been a lot of changes. There's been a lot of seasonal changes, even in the physical world, right? I live in the Midwest, and we're moving from winter to spring, right? It's still snowing, as you can see here, and it's March. But there's a story about you have two wineskins, right? you have the old wineskins, and there's a servant, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, but there's a servant who basically says, "Oh, let me get the jar of wine and pour it in the old wineskins." And the master goes, "Well, no, you can't. You can't pour new wine in old wineskins because they'll break. Aside from, them tasting bad and things like that, but it won't hold up." And so what I realized is that we have to learn to just stop kicking against what the world or the universe is trying to do for us. We got to learn to just embrace the moment, embrace the change, and know that new things are being created. Now, this isn't to say that old things can't be rebirthed. I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is that we have to be open to change. We have to be open to embracing this new idea of ourselves because that's part of the self work. If I'm consistently just hammering core wounds, and telling myself, doing mirror work, and I'm obsessing over it, I'm not fully embracing the change. Rather, I'm forcing it on myself. So, what I want you guys to take away from this is that it's a natural process, and growth is a beautiful thing given the right environment, given the right circumstances. And you're going to look back at this time of transition and you're going to think, A, wow, it's freaking scary. But B, I'm so glad I went through it. Because if I didn't take this time now, it'll come back around a few years later. And that's something that I've learned personally. If I don't deal with it now, I can put it off. I can keep on delaying it. But when God wants you to fully work through something, it will keep on coming back in your life. It may be through new people, it may be through new situations. But if the whole aspect is to grow, if the whole aspect is to be more like Him, how much more are you willing to do? And that's all I have for you guys today. Stay blessed.